Looks good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I am Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner with the City of Santa Barbara. Tonight, we'll be discussing the concept of Paseo, community Paseo corridors, and specifically the community Paseo within the Westside that is currently in design. Who we anticipate on this webinar tonight is residents living along the project route, as well as residents in the neighborhood that have expressed an interest in the project. This presentation is also being translated in Spanish in real time by my colleague, Jose Rivera. And you can click on the interpretation button at the bottom and then click on Spanish. En interpretación disponible, elija su idioma preferido. Aquí interpretación y español aquí. We will also be recording this presentation tonight in case any of your neighbors cannot attend. Feel free to use the chat function at the bottom to type any questions or comments anytime throughout the presentation. We will have a moderator come up after the presentation to ask myself and Derek Bailey, our city's traffic engineer, any questions that you may have. To begin, the concept of the Westside Community Paseos came from the City Council adopted 2016 Bicycle Master Plan and the need for Westside residents to have strong bike routes in their immediate neighborhood, as well as strong connections from the Westside to downtown. The city received a state active transportation grant for the project's design and construction. The project scope of work was modified and documented in the council adopted Westside Neighborhood Transportation Management Plan in March of this year to change the original neighborhood route from Chino to San Andres and Gillespie streets after further traffic analysis determined too many vehicles would need to be diverted from Chino Street onto the neighboring streets. In May, we received a scope change from the state, and we have now moved into the project's design. The concept of community Paseo corridors is finding routes in the community that have a higher level of infrastructure, whether you're walking, biking, scooting, or driving. Where does it make sense to have a higher level of infrastructure for walking and biking? Well, it's streets that have a low volume of vehicles. Here is a map of our community Paseos corridors currently in design. These community Paseos connect to the heart of downtown Santa Barbara, as well as schools, parks, and community centers. As you currently navigate your neighborhood or other neighborhoods in the city, you'll observe that some intersections are easier to navigate than others. Some of the key features that you may find along a community Paseo could include improved sidewalks, safer bike routes, traffic signals, access ramps, landscape peninsulas, shorter street crossings, new street lighting, and improved signage. For the Westside Community Paseo, a lot of the key features will be placed near schools, parks, and businesses. And for the Eastside Community Paseo, also will have specific features that are located near schools, parks, and the community center and the library, as well as Eastside and downtown businesses. So what can you expect along a community Paseo? Well, you can expect low vehicle volume streets, added walking and biking features, and drivers can expect a neighborhood atmosphere. As far as a timeline for this project is, we're currently in the design phase and construction is anticipated in the year 2022, just like the Eastside Community Paseo. Tonight, we'll specifically focus on the west side on Gillespie, Mission, San Pasqual, and Mitchell Terena streets. And we will go through the first 5 features on this map. And tomorrow night's webinar will be focusing on getting from the west side to downtown and to the east side neighborhood connecting at Santa Barbara High School. Now let's begin at the intersection of Gillespie and Mission. This intersection is the main intersection to get to La Cumbre Junior High and Santa Barbara Community Academy. This intersection is currently at a skew and is not stop controlled along Mission and pedestrians. I walked this intersection with a junior high age Girl Scout troop, and one of the girls said, "This is by far during the school commute hours." In response to the community, this intersection will have an always stop. We will also be able to shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians, limiting the time and the right-of-way for students and their families. With the intersection configuration, we are also able to better align the street and have much better sight lines. If you are traveling eastbound on Mission, you will not be able to cut through on southbound Gillespie. So Gillespie can be maintained as a slow street. There will be 2 parking spaces removed at Gillespie with this intersection improvement. As we travel down Gillespie to the intersections of Gillespie and West Valerio and Gillespie and Ariaga, we are more concerned about the speed as we approach Harding Elementary. Here, a raised crossing will be constructed, and this is a Photoshop image of what it will look like. And this raised intersection reinforces the slow speeds and encourages drivers to yield as pedestrians are going across the crosswalk. And again, this is planned for Gillespie and Ariaga and Gillespie and West Valerio. As we travel past Harding Elementary, we will get to the intersection of Gillespie and Mitchell Terena. And what we've heard at this intersection is another difficult intersection for families to cross to get to Harding Elementary. Currently, there are no stop signs on Mitchell Terena, and it is hard for students to find gaps of traffic during the school and work commute hours. The proposed design changes the stop signs from Gillespie to Mitchell Terena, so students will not have to wait for a gap in traffic. There will be a traffic diverter, and this is an image of a traffic diverter in another community. The proposed diverter, we will have 8-inch curbs, and it will look similar to the one in the photo, with the exception that brick is proposed within the curbs instead of concrete. Drivers on Gillespie will now only be able to make right turns to help slow the neighborhood route and limit the amount of vehicles on Gillespie. In summary, the Gillespie corridor will have enhanced intersections, raised crossings, and traffic diverter features, making it attractive for walking, biking, and driving. Also note that all stop signs will be removed from Gillespie and changed to the perpendicular streets along the whole stretch of the Gillespie corridor. Again, this is to favor the movement of bicyclists. Also note, we have received some questions on Gillespie, whether there is parking removal. And with the exception of the 2 spaces that need to be removed at the Gillespie Mission intersection, there is no additional parking removed. And please remember to use the chat function if you have any questions so far with what we just covered on Gillespie Street. I also did want to acknowledge that we have Council Member Oscar Gutierrez on attending this webinar tonight. So thank you, Council Member Gutierrez, for joining us. Now let's move on to the other neighborhood route. Before leaving or getting to San Pasqual, there is a critical connection circled here along Mission Street between Modoc and San Pasqual streets. This is a significant connection piece, not only important to the neighborhood, but it serves as an important regional connection as well. Some of you on this webinar may have participated in the workshop earlier this year at La Cumbre Junior High, where residents supported a separated buffered bike lane along Mission Road between Mission Street and Las Positas Road. We will hear if we get the grant funding for the separated path early next year. And just north of La Cumbre Junior High along Modoc and Las Positas Roads, the city's begun constructing an off-street 2.6-mile multi-use path that will provide connections to Ealing's Park, Arroyo Barro Beach, and to Goleta and UCSB along the Auburn Trail. So all that said, this connection piece is very short, but it's critical. So let's take a closer look. There's a lot of traffic on Mission Street. The biggest concern we've had is from families is the left turn movement from San Pasqual onto Mission Street for less experienced cyclists during the school commute hours. What is planned is a 2-way off-street path in this section. If you're traveling from San Pasqual, you can hop onto the path just past Mission Liquor driveway. And if you are traveling from Modoc or from Mission, you will be able to hop onto the path at the Modoc Mission intersection. There are tree removals needed for adequate sight lines at Mission Street and Modoc intersection to accommodate this new Class 1 off-street path because it will be wider than the current sidewalk. There will be new trees planted in the new parkway, which is roughly located where the on-street bike lane is now. Over time, new trees will add to the existing tree canopy along Mission. Here is a street section of the concept of what it looks like. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the 2-way multi-use path. And then we'll still retain the on-street bike lane as you come from downtown into the west side on Mission Street. And also the north side of the sidewalk will still remain. Cyclists using this off-street path but wanting to continue on the street southeast of the Mission San Pasqual intersection into downtown can, and you'll just hop right onto the on-street bike lane after this connection piece. And for cyclists continuing on San Pasqual Street, they will exit just before the driveway of Mission Liquor. We anticipate there will be 2 parking spaces removed just right at this driveway location. So now we're on the San Pasqual route. With the exception of one all-way stop controlled intersection at San Pasqual and Islay, all stop signs are already on the perpendicular streets to favor the cyclists. Besides a neighborhood route, we have heard from the community that this route will be very popular for bike commuters. At the end of our presentation, and feel free to use the chat function, we will want some resident feedback on whether you think there are additional treatments you may want along this route with respect to slowing the street down. Now we're at the final piece of the route that we are highlighting tonight. Both of the neighborhood routes connect to Terena Street. And Terena Street is one of the main streets connecting the west side to downtown. The community has wanted a strong bike route along Terena Street over the Terena Bridge into downtown, because this route does not involve navigating freeway on and off ramps like Mission and Korea Streets. Despite Terena not having freeway on and off ramps, the street is still very busy for drivers, walkers, and cyclists. And we have heard from the community that we need to have identified spaces for road users due to the amount of traffic and vehicular speeds. And this is different from the neighborhood routes on Gillespie and San Pasqual, where all users coexist. The project does include raised bike lanes for cyclists for a portion of Terena. And the raised bike path will be slightly higher than the roadway, but slightly lower than the sidewalk. We were also looking at vertical delineators in the roadway, providing a buffer between vehicles and cyclists. And this is just a couple images, one an animated image and one from another community, just to show the concept of what a raised bike lane would look like. This is the plan view of where the bike lanes will be raised. And in the portions of the bike lane 2, we'll be using green paint as well to draw attention that this is the area for cyclists to use. For pedestrians, the sidewalks will remain, and we'll take a closer look at the Terena, Dutton, and Terena Almond intersections. Before I move to that intersection, I did want to note that there will be 3 parking spaces removed on the 400 block of West Terena, and 7 parking spaces removed on the 600 block of Terena. So let's look at this intersection here at Dutton and Almond. We have heard from Westside residents that it is very difficult to navigate the crossings at Dutton and Almond due to the volume and speed of traffic and sightlines. Residents often will cross at mid-block to avoid these intersections. Rapid flashing beacons will be installed and will cue drivers to slow down. Pedestrians will also have the option of crossing the intersection 1 lane at a time with the addition of the pedestrian refuge island. There will also be an additional street light installed. For vehicles, you will only be able to make right turns from Dutton and Almond Avenue, and this will also help minimize conflicts with all roadway users. This concludes the Westside neighborhood portion of the Westside Community Paseo. Again, tomorrow night, we'll focus on the connection from the Westside to downtown and Eastside neighborhoods. Other Paseo networks that we are evaluating right now is State Street, which is the spine of the bicycle network. With COVID, you are currently seeing a State Street that is very different. from the pre-pandemic times. And over the next few months, the city will be evaluating what State Street will look like in the interim, approximately the next 3 years, we anticipate, and then what it might look like in a post-pandemic world. All the work that we do is consistent with the City Council's adopted Vision Zero Santa Barbara strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries in the roadway and to increase safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all roadway users. Thank you for attending the webinar tonight. And here is my contact information. With that, I'd like our moderator to hop on to provide our team with any questions or feedback we may have received during the presentation. Myself and Derek Bailey will be here to answer any questions that you may have. I think Michelle may have left her desk just briefly, and I maybe have the help of Katie or Derek for the questions that we may have received or comments.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineering group. And I'm going to just start responding to some of the questions we see coming in here. Sorry, they're starting to come in quickly. Why should you remove stop sign at Isley and Gillespie? There are two things that are trying to be accomplished with creating the community paseo along Gillespie Street in order to encourage cycling. One is to create a really strong feeling of safety so that people of all ages and abilities feel comfortable cycling on Gillespie, but also efficiency so that cyclists are encouraged to use this route that's as safe as possible. And cyclists are attracted to routes that are more efficient. So that's the kind of the genesis behind removing stop signs on Gillespie so that they favor movements on Gillespie. The kind of trick with all this is to not attract a whole bunch of traffic to Gillespie Street, because once you create it as a through street, then drivers are probably going to be more attracted to the street as well. So that's the reason for some of the treatments at Mission Street and at Mitchell Terena Street, which during our studies we found is the biggest sources of traffic on Gillespie Street. And then Jessica also showed some of the images of the raised crosswalks near the school to keep speeds slower. So that's kind of the idea behind it all, is to make it a good through street for cyclists, but not attract any new traffic to the street. There's some questions about parking removal on San Pasqual. The only parking removal places planned for San Pasqual are just immediately south of Mission Street, right where that little bike path is going to curl around onto San Pasqual. I think there's 2 spaces there. Otherwise, no parking removal plan for San Pasqual. Are there any improvements to the Lower West Side connecting this bridge to the network? That's a great question. And there was also another question right above it about changes on Gillespie Street between Mission and Sola and to Victoria. And I'm going to combine the 2 answers. So this project that we're working on right now, we have secured construction funding for it. So this is going to get built. But what kind of the next phase of creating a really good West Side to Lower West Side route, we've actually got a pending grant application right now. So that would create a route that would go from the bottom of Gillespie Street through the Carrillo-San Andreas intersection and down towards the lower west side. That project includes some new intersection treatments, including an all-way stop at the Gillespie-Victoria intersection. So that would be the only changes on Gillespie Street below Mitchell Terena. But we should hear back about our pending grant application in February. And it'll still be a few years off after that. If we are able to get that funding, we'll have to go through a similar process that we're doing right now with the community as far as community meetings and design and everything before that would be built. Are the raised crosswalks designed to function similar to speed humps or more just a visual cue? So that they will act similar to speed humps. There is some vertical deflection, we call it. So they are going to be raised a few inches. There's the graph of it. Yeah, it is hard to see, but the surface of the crosswalk is about 3 inches higher than the roadway surface, which is similar to the speed humps that you'll see around the city. How will bicyclists on the new off-street path on the south side of Modoc turn on to Modoc? Jessica, are you able to go to the slide that shows the Modoc path?
Yes.
There it is. So maybe we'll actually just start down in the bottom right-hand corner on the San Pasqual side. So there'll be a ramp that leads onto the street, kind of near where that number 4 is. So if you're coming up San Pasqual Street from Mitchell Terena, you can just slip onto that little path, turn the corner onto Mission. And as you head down towards Modoc, the ramps will line up directly with the bike lanes that are across the street. It's kind of where those yellow spots are, those will be the ramps. And so we're also planning, if you can see those kind of arrow looking things that go across the street, there'll probably be some green highlights in that area just to provide some guidance for cyclists how to get from the ramps directly into the bike lanes.
Keep going, Derek. And can you see the cursor when I am trying to highlight as you're talking? I'm curious if
yes,
okay.
It's showing up on my computer.
Good.
We did get hope there will be delineators on Mitchell Terena will be attractive and not the white posts used on East Coda. We're not quite sure if there'll be delineators on Mitchell Terena or not. In order to fit the delineators in, and just for everybody else that's not familiar, Coda Street coming from the east side has a bike lane against the curb, and then there's a painted buffer that's about 2 or 3 feet wide, and then there's kind of a vertical plastic delineator in the middle separating traffic from the bike lanes. We've received a lot of feedback, good feedback from cyclists that they feel safer in that bike lane and they appreciate the separation. It takes up space though in order to create that buffer so that there's room for that vertical delineator. And so that's kind of why we're leaning towards the raised bike lane concept as opposed to a buffer, but we'd appreciate your feedback. And if that's something that would make you as a cyclist feel safer, please let us know. We'd really appreciate your feedback on that. So to confirm, there will be a new light at Dutton, Almond, and Mitchell Terena. By light, there'll be a street light, so one that kind of illuminates the intersection at night. There'll also be pedestrian activated flashers installed at that intersection. Yeah, there you go. And that median, we didn't go into too much detail about that during the presentation, but that red area is a raised median. So that performs a really important function as it relates to the bike route. One of the things we've heard pretty strongly is that people feel very uncomfortable at this intersection. And operationally, part of the problem with this intersection is Almond on the south side and Dutton on the north side are both very narrow. And they both have a lot of traffic on them. So when people are trying to turn on and off Mitchell Terena onto the side streets, sometimes when there's drivers trying to pull out, there's not enough room for everybody to fit by. And from a safety perspective, that creates a lot of discomfort for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers too. These streets are probably carrying more traffic than they're really designed for. And so what this median is going to do is restrict left turns. So you won't be able to turn left from Dutton onto Mitchell Terena to go towards downtown. Or if you're north on Almond, you won't be able to turn left to go on Mitchell Terena towards San Andreas. And that's going to cut down the amount of traffic using Dutton and Almond. So drivers will have to use either Sola to go over to San Andreas if they're coming from Almond, or on Dutton, they'll have to use Ariaga to get over to San Andreas. So that reduced volume should make that intersection function much better and also make both Dutton and Almond much more comfortable streets to walk and cycle on.
Derek, are there any more questions coming in through the chat feature? Michelle let me know that there's some other Q&A questions, so she can read us those as well if we're finished with the ones that are coming, I think, through via chat.
Yeah, I can go ahead and read the Q&A questions if you'd like. I'll start with the first one. How does the Gillespie segment take the line 1 bus route into account?
The line 1 route is the one that circulates down Puerto Zuelo in front of Lacumba Junior High, I believe. If I'm remembering that right, that won't be affected at all. Can you go to the Mission Gillespie intersection, Jessica?
Sure. And I'm sorry, almost there, Derek.
There it is. Jessica, can you hover your cursor over the, I guess you call it the northeast corner? Yeah, right in there. Yeah, so currently the bus line comes down Gillespie and it turns left from Gillespie onto Mission to go back towards the freeway. So you'll notice the radius on that corner is a little bit bigger than the corner that's right across the street. And that's to accommodate those bus movements. So that bus line is not going to change at all. We also have to design this intersection so that fire trucks can get through in case there's an emergency. Just to bring that up as well. But yeah, no changes to that bus line.
Okay, the next question. Will Dutton still be a two-way street?
Yes, Dutton will still be a two-way street, but as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, if you're coming down Dutton from Ariaga towards Mitchell Terena, you'll only be able to turn right when you get to Mitchell Terena. So we think a lot of drivers will choose to use Ariaga instead. And so even though Dutton's a two-way street and it will continue to be a two-way street, it should be less heavily trafficked than it is right now.
Thank you. Okay. Question, will the bus on Gillespie between Puerto Zuelo and Mission be affected?
Yeah, that's the one we just mentioned. So no effect there. They'll still be able to run down Gillespie and turn left once they get to Mission Street. Thank
you. Next question. Again, this appears to be a similar question. Will the bus route be diverted off Gillespie Street between Lacumba Junior High and Mission? Yeah, again, that bus route will continue running on its existing route. They'll be able to turn left from Gillespie onto Mission. Great. Another question. Can you discuss what will occur on Gillespie between Mitchell Terena and Victoria Streets?
So on Mitchell Train, or on Gillespie, between Mitchell Train and Victoria, currently the stop signs stop Gillespie and favor Sola Street. So that's one of the two intersections on Gillespie Street where the stop signs will be turned to favor Gillespie. So Gillespie will be the through movement there. And then the future phase of the project, in order to connect Gillespie Street to the lower west side, that's the one where we have the grant application pending right now. That would turn that intersection at Victoria and Gillespie into an all-way stop. We've also had requests for sidewalk at the bottom of Gillespie Street at all. And unfortunately, it's not part of this project. There's not enough funding within this project to put in sidewalk on that block. So those will be the only changes south of Mitchell Terena Street.
Okay, sticking to maybe Mitchell Terena Street, I see another question. In order to add the crosswalk at Almond and Mitchell Terena, what improvements will the city be making, and how will that impact parking and the bus stop on Mitchell Terena?
Sure. So the red area there, again, is a raised island. There'll be a crosswalk. There'll be new ADA compliant access ramps, street light to illuminate the crossing for nighttime, and as well the pedestrian activated flashers will be at that intersection as well. The bus stop is going to be for eastbound going towards downtown, is going to be moved a little bit further east. So it's east of the Almond intersection. In that area where the cursor is hovering, that parking is going to be eliminated in that area in favor for the bike lane. The westbound bus stop will stay where it is. So it'll be just a little bit further west of the crosswalk in that area, right in there. Yes. So that bus stop will not be changing location.
Okay, a question regarding parking spaces on Mitchell Terena. Somebody's asking how many spaces will be lost on Mitchell Terena?
I believe there's about a half a dozen immediately east of Almond. And on the west side, those are the only spaces along Mitchell Terena that will be affected.
Yes, according to my notes, Derek, we had about 3 spaces on the 400 block of West Mitchell Terena and 7 spaces removed on the 600 block of Mitchell Terena.
Okay, yeah, those 3 spaces are over closer to Castillo.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Right, another question. Somebody has a question regarding pedestrian safety. If you could discuss pedestrian safety if stop signs are removed on Gillespie. And how do stop signs encourage vehicles?
Great question. As far as crossing Gillespie Street, there's a couple scenarios. If it's at one of the raised crossings near the school, obviously traffic will be slowed down, so that should be a very safe crossing. But if it's at one of the other crossings, like Islay or Pedragosa Street, for example, because of the treatments at Mitchell Terena Street and Mission Street, there shouldn't be very much traffic using Gillespie Street. So it'll be pretty easy to cross the street just because there won't be a lot of traffic to contend with. Was there a part 2 to that question, Michelle?
Sorry, let me get back to that question. Yes, the part 2 was, how do stop signs encourage vehicles?
I think that may be in the context of why the stop sign orientation is being changed from one street to the other at certain intersections along Gillespie. This goes back to trying to create a safe and efficient cycling and walking route between Harding and Lacumba Junior High. Again, by creating this efficient route where cyclists don't have to stop, the concern is that we're also creating an environment that vehicles and drivers might find attractive to use as well. And so it's finding a balance between creating an efficient route for cyclists, but not attracting new traffic to the street. And that's really the objective.
Thank you. Another question regarding traffic on Gillespie. It says, will traffic on Gillespie be one way for only one block as you approach the Mission Gillespie intersection from Pedragosa?
No, it will be two-way. So if drivers, for example, live on the west side of the block, they'll be able to turn around anywhere on that block and go the opposite way. Just in order to limit the overall amount of traffic, though, on Gillespie Street, drivers just won't be able to turn from Mission. So there will have to be some kind of turnaround maneuver performed in order to point south on that block.
Okay. There's a question regarding crosswalks at Gillespie and Ariaga. It says, did you consider a raised crosswalk at Ariaga and Gillespie?
Yes, and apologies if we didn't make that clear. What's seen in the image here, there will be one at both Gillespie and Ariaga, and one at the other end of the block at Gillespie and Valerio. So there are two of them planned. We'd love to get everyone's feedback on this style of crosswalk. It's new to Santa Barbara. And as well, just speed control in general, what your thoughts are about what's been proposed so far for Gillespie Street, if we're on the right track.
Okay. Question about bike lanes on Mitchell Terena. The question is, will there be a separate bike lane on Mitchell Terena between San Andreas and Gillespie?
Excuse me, sorry, my throat's getting dry. There's not. The bike lane, as far as this project goes, will end at San Andreas Street. And there's currently no plans to extend that further west than San Andreas Street. So once cyclists get west of San Andreas Street, they'd be sharing the lane with vehicle traffic, and there would be no changes whatsoever to parking.
Okay, just trying to see if I can find questions in the similar neighborhood area here. There's concern for speeds of vehicle travel on San Andreas. It says, are any improvements planned for San Andreas? Cars drive really fast on the street, and there are several close calls with bikes and pedestrians.
That's a really great question. So two things. We're hoping that once we get really good bike infrastructure in place on these parallel streets to San Andreas, that cyclists will generally find those streets more attractive to use rather than San Andreas. But some cyclists will continue to use San Andreas. We fully acknowledge that. As for pedestrians, there are plans for San Andreas, yes. That same grant application that we mentioned several questions ago that'll connect the west side to the lower west side also includes crosswalks, new crosswalks at just about every intersection along San Andreas, as well as what we call a lighting corridor. So that would be lower level lights. I guess with the tree canopy right now, a lot of the light gets drowned out in the tree canopy. So there would be new lights installed that are mounted below the tree canopy to really give some nice light onto the sidewalks. So the crosswalks would include the lighting. There would be curb extensions for corners, and that helps preserve parking so that there's good sight lines around that last parked car. And as well, the pedestrian activated flashers, similar to the one that is definitely going to go in at Almond and Dutton as part of this project because it's funded. But that same treatment is also planned for those intersections on San Andreas Street, should that grant come through. And like I said, we're hoping for some good news in February when we find out the results.
Following on that last question answer, similar concept here. The question is, has the city considered adding speed bumps or have other options to slow the speed of car traffic on San Andreas?
Not speed humps, no. Speed humps, they're more complicated than it might seem. They do definitely slow traffic, most traffic. Some drivers, actually, if you speed up, it can actually, it's hard on your vehicle, but it can kind of negate the sensation of going over something. Some drivers do choose to do that on some of the other streets that we have in Santa Barbara that have speed humps. But the big concern with speed humps is emergency responders. So when the fire department needs to get to an emergency as fast as possible, they're going to be using San Andreas Street, they're going to be using Chino Street to get up into the west side. So we can't do anything that's going to intentionally impede them. Gillespie Street's a little bit different story just because they're likely going to come at emergencies from a different direction. But as far as primary response routes, San Andreas is really important. That's where doing things like crosswalks and flashers and that sort of thing at the intersections, try to slow traffic down that way and really give drivers just a sensation of it being more of a neighborhood street and to not go so fast.
Okay, thank you. Another question to address traffic calming strategies. This specific questions regarding San Pasqual Street. And says, can you explain more of the traffic calming strategies for San Pasqual?
Currently, there are no traffic calming strategies proposed for San Pasqual Street. And we're really hoping that everyone here tonight and everybody that reviews this recording will let us know what they think about that. Generally down at the bottom of San Pasqual, and when I say the bottom of San Pasqual, I mean like around Ariaga Street, is a lower traffic volume, and then it kind of builds as you get up closer to Mission Street. So generally, most of the corridor is fairly comfortable for cycling. Some cyclists might be less comfortable as you get that last block close to Mission, just because it is a little bit busier. But we'd really love to hear what you think about how comfortable you are cycling on San Pasqual as it is today, and whether or not there's something that you think we should add to this project just to make it the best possible cycling route.
Thank you. And next question for Jessica, give Derek a quick break. Jessica, this question is more specific to the process and what we've done and how we've gotten here regarding the process. And the question is, what sort of stakeholder consultations have you conducted in the process? What type of bicyclists are you expecting? How are the streets going to be affected? So in general, just kind of more of a background question of the process and how we got to where we are today.
Yes, thanks, Michelle, and thank you for that question. We've had a lot of feedback from Westside residents. Some of our biggest outreach efforts were during the 2016 Bicycle Master Plan, where we held various workshops in neighborhoods, and Westside being one of the locations. Again, we heard during that time that there needed to be strong routes within the Westside neighborhood to key destinations like the schools. And then also, we also heard that Westside is also used as a big commuter route. So those traveling maybe from Goleta into the Santa Barbara, wanting to get to downtown, use the Westside neighborhood as a cut through, and so wanting a strong route for that, and vice versa. There's Westside residents too that work in Goleta, so wanting a strong route within the neighborhood and then beyond from there. Then we heard additional feedback during the Westside neighborhood transportation planning effort that was held through mainly 2019 and the beginning part of 2020, and that it helped affirm what we had been hearing through the bicycle master plan outreach. And we've also met with our advocacy groups, Coast and the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition too. And let's see. And then we continue to hear feedback through our design process, and next steps in the process for this project is it would go to the Architecture Board of Review and the Historic Landmarks Commission. Next stop, we're hoping to visit there before the end of the year, and that's another opportunity to provide public feedback. And then once we get through design review, the project would go into the final design and right-of-way phase, and then subsequently construction in 2022.
Thank you, Jessica. And also here, just a reminder, maybe I have a question asking how people might be able to see the presentation available online after this meeting. And maybe also if you could follow up with where people could email you for more specific questions.
Yeah, so we did record this presentation tonight, and we will post that on the Project West website. So it's santabarbaraca.gov / Westside Community Paseos is where you'll find that information. We hope to have it hopefully up by next week, as well as the presentation that you saw tonight. And then we hope to then also post the plans that will be submitted for the Architecture Board of Review and Historic Landmarks Commission. And then also, yes, if you have any other comments or think of something 2 days from now that you forgot to ask tonight, feel free to email us at Westside Community Paseos at santabarbaraca.gov. We're also monitoring that, and thank you for those that have already emailed or called with questions. We've really appreciated it, and like the conversations. Of course, we really wanted to have this design update in person, but with the pandemic, we're doing the webinar format. But again, we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. And these have been just fantastic questions, so thank you so much. Michelle, any additional comments or feedback?
Yes, so let me carry on. We have a question here asking whether this project will relate to any of the new improvements at Bonnet Park.
That one, I think, as Derek mentioned, would tie into the grant that we just submitted for the Active Transportation Program grant. And so some of those involve strong crossings to Bonnet Park. That is a very across for San Andreas into Bonnet Park, and also the Boys and Girls Club. There's a heavily traveled route. Not only the Park and Westside Boys and Girls Club, but also in the other direction for families living in the apartment buildings surrounding that area going to Harding Elementary.
And just to mention to everybody too, the Parks Department in the city is going to be doing a project really soon to perform some upgrades in the park itself. So that's a completely separate project than what we're here tonight.
Thank you. Next question regarding tree removals. There's a question and regarding removal of trees on Mitchell Terena, and will they be replaced?
Yeah, there will be tree removals. I need to pull up the plan, so give me a minute to quantify in my notes of how many tree removals there are. but they will not be replaced right along Mitchell Terena. We are proposing about 49 new trees as part of this project. And I have approximately 10 trees that will be removed along Mitchell Terena.
Thank you. This next question is regarding traffic and at the parking lot at Super Cucas. It says its parking lot's extremely busy, and how will the project be impacted by bike traffic on Dutton?
Great question. Yes, and I think that really gets to the heart of some of the operational problems, traffic operational problems that we all experience at this intersection. Dutton is very busy, and it's very narrow, and so it's a challenging street to use. Technically, it's a street. It feels like an alley. And it carries a lot of traffic, and really more than it was ever designed for, because it's used a lot as a cut-through route to get from San Pasqual down to Mitchell Terena. So what's going to happen with these islands that are shown in red in the middle of the screen? Can we show that other graphic that kind of zooms in on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So drivers on Dutton or going south towards Mitchell Terena Street, or on to Almond going north towards Mitchell Terena Street, they're not going to be able to turn left. If they want to go those directions, they're going to have to go around the block. So what's going to happen is the amount of traffic on both Almond and Dutton is going to go down. So all of the traffic and the conflicts that everybody experiences near the Cucas parking lot, that should go down substantially. So and so that'll create a lot more safer environment for cyclists and pedestrians in that area as well.
Thank you, Derek. Next question. Will drivers on Gillespie be able to drive straight on Gillespie Street at Mitchell Terena?
No. Can you go to that graphic, Jessica?
Yes, I'm bringing it up.
And kind of going back to the discussion we had about stop signs and trying to create an efficient route for cyclists so they can ride from one end of the corridor to the other without having to stop. That has the potential to attract drivers to Gillespie Street as well. You know, drivers, just like cyclists, are going to seek out the most efficient street that they can use. And if there's a street available that doesn't have any stops, it's going to seem really attractive. The two biggest sources of traffic on Gillespie Street are from Mission and from Gillespie, and turning on and off Mission and turning on and off Gillespie. So in order to cut down on that traffic, so we don't end up with more traffic using the street when the stop signs are changed, this is one of the treatments that are going to be used at Gillespie Street. So traffic on Gillespie Street approaching Mitchell Terena is going to be forced to turn right. Those little gaps in the center, they'll be large enough for cyclists to slip through. And as well, there'll be a treatment so that if fire trucks need to get through, they'll be able to make an adjustment and get through as well. But regular vehicular traffic is going to be forced to turn right.
Thank you, Derek. We have a question about whether the crosstown shuttle route will, Question is, what about the crosstown shuttle route that goes along Gillespie?
Yeah, great question. So normally, or today, what happens is that crosstown shuttle route comes down Gillespie and turns left on Mitchell Terena to go towards downtown. Actually, if you can go back to the last graphic we were just on. Yeah, and so that shuttle is not going to be able to turn left because of this treatment. There's a lot of drivers that make that left turn. And again, that's one of those big sources of traffic on Gillespie Street. So if we're going to make sure that we don't attract a whole bunch of new traffic to Gillespie Street, we really have to make sure that we're addressing those heavy movements. There's two options that we've been discussing with MTD about how to accommodate the shuttle. One is to change the circulation around Harding. Right now it goes clockwise. So it goes down Mitchell Terena and then up mountain over on Valerio and then down Gillespie. So it kind of makes this clockwise movement around Harding. One option is just to make it counterclockwise. So just move the bus stops to the other side of the street so that the bus won't have to make that left turn. The other option is the crosstown shuttle continues to circulate counter or clockwise. It's just they'll cut over to Chino Street on Ariaga and then get back over to Mitchell Terena that way. So we've been talking to MTD about that.
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding bike lanes and bus stops on Mitchell Terena Street. Let's see, it was on Mitchell Terena Street, how do bus stops and raised bike lanes interact?
Buses can pull onto raised bike lanes. So the raised bike lanes are, if you can imagine a 6-inch curb that you normally see at the side of the street, the raised bike lane is going to be about 3 inches. And at the edge of the raised bike lane, there'll be a taper down into the street. So buses can pull over into that area to make their stops. But the change in elevation should be enough to keep most vehicles out of there.
Following up on that, another question regarding bike lanes on Mitchell Terena Street. They want to know if there will be separate bike lanes on Mitchell Terena Street between San Andreas and Gillespie.
No, it's not planned as part of this project. Again, we are trying to create some really strong parallel routes so that if cyclists, for example, want to get to the crosstown route, they would go up Dutton and towards San Pasqual and then use that path on Mission. There will be some cyclists that want to get over to Gillespie. The parking removal that would be associated with that was pretty significant. And so just as part of this project, it just didn't seem feasible. For the time being, there will be sharrows in the street to share the lane markings in order to get cyclists from San Andreas Street over to Gillespie.
Thank you. Jessica, there's a request if you could please put the map up of Gillespie and Mission Street up. Somebody requested to see that image again. While that's up, I'll just go to another question. There's still some confusion regarding safety between pedestrians at Gillespie and Sola. They're concerned with children walking to Harding School. And so if stop signs are removed, how will that ensure safety at that intersection?
Great question. It should actually be safer for students walking up Harding or up Gillespie towards Harding. Currently, Gillespie stops at Sola. So Sola is free flow through that intersection. So any students walking up Gillespie towards Harding, you know, they'd have to cross a Sola Street, which is free flowing. When the stop signs are, the orientation has changed so that Sola stops instead of Gillespie, they'll be able to cross Sola Street with a stop sign. So getting to Harding will be safer with this configuration.
Thank you, Derek. Just a couple more questions on the Q&A format. A question regarding, Someone would like to know if there were any future improvements planned for Carrillo and San Andres. They mentioned that this is a major bottleneck connecting the west side to the lower west side.
Yeah, great question. We have a totally separate project in design right now, and it also relates to that grant that we've applied for as well. So there's a project that we're designing right now that's going to go out to bid this winter. So we expect to have a contractor working on it by the spring. It's going to kind of reorient the crosswalks that cross Carrillo Street at San Andreas. One of the things that really affects traffic capacity at that intersection is the amount of flashing don't walk time that it takes to get across San Andreas Street, or it takes to get across Carrillo Street. I believe there's 20 seconds of flashing don't walk time. And normally what happens, especially for pedestrians on the east side of San Andreas Street, or that goes with northbound traffic, is when a pedestrian hits that button, they'll get a 7-second walk symbol, and then there's about 20 seconds of flashing don't walk countdown time for them to complete their crossing, because it's such a long crossing and the amount of flashing don't walk time is proportional to the crossing distance. Normally there's 3 or 4 cars in the queue, and they've long since cleared out. Meanwhile, the flashing don't walk time is still going and going and going, while traffic is held up on every other approach at the intersection. So one of the things this project is going to do that we're going to be building next year is it's going to square up the crossing. So they're a lot shorter. They're not going to go across Carrillo Street at a skew. The flashing don't walk time will probably be cut in half, so that once traffic and pedestrians clear out a lot quicker, other movements can get served faster. So that should really help with some of the congestion that drivers experience at that intersection. And it'll also result in safer crossings for pedestrians. Lighting along Carrillo Street. It starts at Miramonte, coming down the hill all the way to the freeway, but especially that area, a well-used pedestrian corridor, and left turn arrows. So there'll be left turn arrows to get from Carrillo Street into the west side and lower west. That relates to the project that we've applied for grant funding that we'll hear about in the spring. There's going to be kind of a little pockets off to the side of that intersection that will tie into with that future project, so that north-south bike movements on San Andreas Street will be easily accommodated. If there's anybody that's interested in taking a look at those plans, again, we didn't have them prepared to look at tonight, and they're very conceptual right now. We have applied for grant funding for that future phase, but email us and we'd be happy to share that with you and kind of let you know what's being thought of long term.
Yes, and also related to the Carrillo and San Andreas intersection, you can also use this email and we could send you links to those drawings as well.
Thanks, Jessica.
And like you said, construction, Derek, for Carrillo San Andreas is slated for winter 20?
Probably spring.
Okay.
Yeah, and it also includes a full repaving of Carrillo Street, so it's going to be a really great enhancement for the West Side neighborhood.
Great. There's a couple more questions on the Q&A format. I see this. I'm going to read this verbatim. It's a little bit long. The question is, as a driver, I take a left from Ariaga onto San Andres daily. Find this to be a very difficult, poor line of sight. There was an accident there just last week. If the plan is to encourage more use of Ariaga rather than Dutton, I wonder if there is any plan to manage traffic on San Andres to slow speeds or improve visibility.
Yeah, great question. Again, that future project will have a more comprehensive redesign of the crosswalks and sightlines at that intersection. But before this project moves forward, we will be looking at the Ariaga intersection for sightlines, just to make sure that those are adequate. We expect that with the changes on Dutton, that traffic is going to likely spread out a bit. There'll probably be some using Ariaga, some using Valerio, and potentially even Islay to a certain extent. Because right now, traffic is coming down San Pasqual, some of it from quite a distance, almost all the way up to Mission Street in order to get to Mitchell Terena Street. So if Mitchell Terena Street's really their destination, they'll kind of be filtering over onto San Andreas Street at different points.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question regarding Mission and Gillespie. Question is, can drivers turn right from Mission onto Gillespie going to La Cumbre Junior High?
No. If you can bring that graphic up again, Jessica, and maybe we can spend a minute here and just talk about what's going on. As Jessica mentioned in her presentation, this intersection's got quite a significant skew to it. And by that, I mean Gillespie really does that as it goes across the intersection. And the corners don't line up very well. One of the things we've heard is that this is an important walking route to get to La Cumbre Junior High. And as well, through our traffic studies, we also found out that this is a major source of traffic on Gillespie Street. So again, as a way to control the amount of traffic entering Gillespie Street and using Gillespie Street, this location makes a lot of sense for turn restrictions. So there'll be no more turns from Mission Street in either direction onto Gillespie Street. And as well, with these diverters, these landscaped diverters, there'll be new trees in them. There's also going to be the opportunity to really line up those crosswalks a lot better than we'd be able to today, just because there is such a significant skew in the intersection. You'll also notice there's going to be a small island on the east leg of the intersection. That's that red. If you can just hover, there it is. Thank you. We're calling those stop islands. And one of the concerns that there is with installing an always stop at an intersection that has really light volumes on the side street is stop sign compliance. And what I mean by that is drivers tend to learn over time what to expect at certain intersections. And if stop signs were put up at this intersection and the driver uses the intersection over and over and over, what they're going to find out over time is that there's not, usually not going to be traffic on the side street to contend with. So that stop turns into a roll and into more of a roll. And over time, stop sign compliance becomes really not what it needs to be in order for safe operations at the intersection. So at an intersection like this, where the traffic is going to be really favoring Mission Street, there's going to be a second stop sign that's placed in that island just to really reinforce that it's a stop controlled location. There's not one directly across the street from it because it's directly in the turning path of those buses that come down Mission Street or down Gillespie Street and turn east on Mission to go towards the freeway.
Thank you, Derek. Another question regarding removal of parking spaces. This one specifically a question if parking spaces will be removed on Gillespie at Mission Street.
Yes, there'll likely be two removed. There'll be one there where Jessica's hovering her cursor where that landscaped diverter is, and then one catty corner across the intersection right there. Yeah.
Okay, that's all of the current questions I have in the question and answer feature.
Michelle, I did see one scroll by a little while ago. I think it's a really great question. Somebody asked about what devices are going to be on Gillespie Street between the raised crosswalk at the raised school crosswalk at Valerio up to Mission. And currently, there aren't any plans to add anything to that section of Gillespie Street. Yeah, that's those 3 blocks between Valerio and Mission Street. We'd really love to hear from everybody listening, either live or on the recording. If you think we need to do any more there. I know we have had complaints in the past about speeding on Gillespie Street. We want to be sensitive to everybody that lives on the street though, and not overdo the traffic calming, the 2 raised crosswalks that are going to be next to the school. But if the community thinks that there needs to be more done, please let us know.
I was just scrolling through to see if there was any others in the Q&A that haven't been answered. There's let's see, a new question just came in. Will there still be parking on Mitchell Terena?
West of San Andreas Street, there will be no changes. East of San Andreas Street, east of Almond, there's 7 spaces along the south side of the road, and those will be eliminated in favor of the bike lane and the bus stop.
Some of those are off the map as you start to climb up the hill.
Right.
Okay. Jessica, maybe take an opportunity to just show the website again about where people can email you with additional questions.
Again, feel free to call or email. And those of you that are interested, tomorrow night, again, we'll be focusing on this stretch. So getting from the west side to downtown, this is what we'll be covering. Michelle, were there any questions that came in Spanish that Jose may have needed to translate?
I don't see any questions in Spanish. And some of the questions have been, just so people are aware, some of the questions have been answered by staff in typed fashion. So if I didn't read your question, that may have been one of the reasons. But I don't see any other current open questions in the question and answer feature. And again, if you have a question, please use the question and answer feature rather than the chat feature.
We want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we plan to end at 7:30, so we will start to wind down. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was really great. We appreciate all the questions and the feedback. So thank you for spending your night with us tonight. And hearing no questions, we'll go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thanks again.